Hello to all the families out there wanting to learn more about the NDIS process. My name is Suzanne Edmund and I am an Education Advisor with SBH Queensland based in the Townsville office. As you may be aware, Townsville is one of the early transition sites for the NDIS rollout. There is still much confusion about the scheme, so we're lucky enough to speak with one of our mums who has gone through the NDIS journey in Townsville. I would like to welcome Rachel Emerson and thank her for allowing us into her life and to benefit from her NDIS experience. Thank you so much, Rachel, for joining us today. Can we start by you telling us a little bit about Michelle and her needs?
Sure. So my daughter Michelle's just turned 5. She has spina bifida as I guess her main condition, but in partnership with that she has hydrocephalus, club feet, dislocated hips, neurogenic bladder and multicystic kidneys. She also has global developmental delays.
So you've gone through a lot of the NDIS application process. What are the steps that you've gone through so far?
So far we've gone through meeting with the planner. There was a number of interviews that had to take place with her for us to tell the story and for her to capture all our information. Then I probably was a little bit different to everybody else in that I was really prepared and had already worked through the workbook, so I was able to present with her an already completed workbook, some really clear goals of what Michelle needed. That kind of helped with the interview process, and then so therefore from what I'd already written, she was able to draft up a plan that's now in its final stages. It's gone to the NDIA and now we have a document back that is up now for us to either review and accept or then modify. So that's where we're at the moment.
Have you found the process has been confusing, or you felt that you investigated a lot of things beforehand which made the meetings easier? And do you have any tips and resources that helped you along the way in order to prepare for the planning meeting?
I think I found, because Townsville was a trial site and the first for Queensland, there wasn't a lot of information out there, not detailed information. So I went to every webinar, every seminar, every workshop that was available. I joined the Facebook NDIS page. I also joined the newsletter for the NDIA that they disseminate. So I just tried to collect information from all different sources. I think, though, in all honesty, I still found that the micro amount of information or the detail that I really needed to feel prepared wasn't there. So therefore it was about eventually befriending some other people, even from other states or other regions who had been through it, and just asking their experiences or just sort of collecting pieces of information off the Facebook group really helped. But I started this process, I'd say probably about 18 months ago. And for me initially it was about just getting my head around what Michelle's needs were, because I think when you just live it, sometimes you take for granted what you use, what you spend money on. You just are so used to it being part of your normal life that you sometimes can forget the small things. So I kept a diary of all her medications, the amount of nappies that we went through, how many trips we made to the hospitals, all her surgeries, documented all the conversations that I had at clinics about what potential treatments or resources that she would be likely to need. So therefore when it came to actually sitting down and writing it out, I had a really extensive history of what her life had been like and what resources we used in the last 12 months, which was actually quite surprising. I was shocked to sort of see, oh my goodness, look how much we've spent. No wonder I have no money left at the end of the week. From there, I found tracking down, there's a workbook, and there's 2 different styles of workbooks. One for older people who have disabilities, so it would obviously reflect different needs, compared to the one that's for the children, so 0 to 6 in Michelle's case.
Where did you find that?
That's on the NDIS website. It takes a little bit of Googling to find it, but at least if you just start by typing in like NDIS Workbook Queensland and just sort of follow links. It's a bit of a trial and error. Otherwise, if you join the NDIS Facebook page, they have a link section and you can just go into the link section and they have it listed there. So that's been fantastic, actually, the NDIS website for the Facebook page. They've got a lot of useful links there. So I looked at the workbook, and at first, I think initially in my head I was going, I just want her needs met. You know, there's these huge gaps. We're really lucky that we have the support of Spina Bifida Queensland, where we're really lucky we had some great therapists in her life. However, we also had some huge gaps. And so when NDIS was coming in, my thinking was, oh, thank goodness someone's going to bridge the gaps. And that was where my focus was. So when I first opened up the workbook and it was about, you know, tell us about your family and tell us what our hopes and dreams are, I was like, really? This is all a bit fluffy, and I just wanted to get to the meat of what we were really there about. But from my experience, what I've realised is that fluffy stuff, or painting that picture, is incredibly important, because they really want to get a sense of who is Michelle, what are her goals. And that's really hard to talk about when you've got a child who's nonverbal and is quite young emotionally and cognitively. You're thinking, you know, what are Mish's goals? As long as she wakes up and has brekkie and has a happy day, she's good. But that's not enough for NDIS. And also realising that this is her first plan. So this is really her big introduction into NDIS. And from here, this creates the foundation that her other plans come from. So it's really important that I painted a picture of our family, because every family is unique, what our strengths are, what our challenges are. Really talked up Michelle, you know, what's she good at? What does she struggle with? What are her challenges? And even though NDIS is looking at just funding you for her immediate needs in the next 12 months, it's still got to be that foundation as, well, we might not need this year, but realistically, it's going to be very soon down the track. So I probably found it more useful doing the workbook a little bit back the front. In the draft stage, I first of all sat down and wrote down everything that I thought she needed, everything based on that diary that I'd kept, the things that she needed. So walking aids, continence equipment, her AFOs, for example, her specialised clothing that she needs, hydrotherapy, a change table, bathroom modifications, all of the things that I knew were her immediate needs that if I could have right now would make her life so much easier. Then I backtracked. Then I went, okay, why do we need that? Let's tell the story. And I found the workbook was difficult to use because after each question, and they're big questions that require a lot of information, they had this much, like they might have had 5 or 6 lines. And to give you an idea, for each question I wrote a page of information on Michelle. So I talked about where she was born, all of her conditions, I listed them out, because I was also really conscious that our planner may have no understanding whatsoever what spina bifida is all about. So I just put in dot point spina bifida, and then just a one sentence about what that means. What is spina bifida? You know, is it curable? Is it non-curable? It's a lifelong condition. Then, you know, so I dot pointed all of her conditions, and then I wrote a paragraph on what that means for her. So, you know, she's a really happy and bubbly little girl, but when she gets sick quickly, and she gets sick in a way that it's serious and potentially life-threatening, so we need immediate medical assistance. What does that mean? Because we live out of town. What does that mean for my family when I have other children and a husband who, you know, at times works away? So I painted the dynamics. I even talked about schooling. Mish is at school, but she's nonverbal. And she goes to a wonderful school here, which is also a special needs school, but the other children in her class are also nonverbal. So even though they communicate on a level that they can communicate enough, it's not enough for her to develop the communication to eventually develop positive relationships out in the community. So that was a big thing for me. It was like, yep, she goes to school, she sees her speechy, I want more. I want more from Michelle, because how does she develop healthy, positive relationships when she's always surrounded either by other children who can't communicate or speechies who know exactly how to communicate? Like, how does she eventually even communicate with grandma or cousins who don't know signing? So it was about really unpacking all of those dynamics in the family. So then I found once we fleshed that out, I even talked a little bit about the impact of having Michelle's needs on the other children. So talking about, I have now, 3 school runs to do, which means it takes me an hour and a half to drop everyone off at school. In that time, Mish often has to have a nappy change and she has to be catheterised. So we have to sometimes stop on the side of the highway. The other kids are going, quick mum, I've got to get to school, we've got assembly on this morning, and I'm parked on the side of the road trying to catheterise her. I just wanted them to get how some things that are just little things for other people are huge for us. And I found that was critically important, because our planner was just then blown away. She was like, wow, I had no idea. And it was really good in that it generated then other questions for her, like, well, how do you do that? What happens if this happens? What equipment do you use? Like, do you just lay her on a towel on the ground? And I'm like, yeah, I do. Or on the back of the tailgate of the Toyota. So it was good that then it prompted, wow, I can see why you really need these resources, or what about this? And so it was really useful conversation to have. Now, what was the next part of the question?
Just the resources that you found useful.
Yep.
But what, in the discussions that we're having now, it just hits me that you do have to be incredibly well planned prior to actually meeting with the planner.
Yes.
Can you see some pitfalls in some of our other families who may not have the resources or the ability or the understanding to be that well planned?
Huge. Yeah, I think, I don't want hubby to watch this, but because I'm Michelle's daily carer, there was even things when I was talking about it, hubby was surprised, because even though he's home and a really engaged hands-on dad, there's things, as I said earlier, that you just take for granted that you do. Like, I probably always bought her lubrication. He had no idea. And honestly, if I got him to write the plan, he probably wouldn't have even remembered half the creams that we use, because we just have this massive medical kit of stuff that we use for her. So it really hit home that you have to really micromanage and think about everything that you use. So again, keeping that diary was critically important, because the planners themselves, they're lovely and they do their best, but they don't understand our children's conditions. They don't understand their needs. They don't even probably fully understand the resources that are available, because as you can imagine, there would be 1,000,001 special needs conditions that NDIS has the potential to support. So it's unrealistic to think they're going to understand your child's condition. So being fully prepared, right down to even knowing what the creams are, what they cost, how many nappies you use a day, what's happened in your life when there's been the dark times, like when your child's been incredibly sick. Who do you rely on? Do you have to get grandma to come in and look after the other kids? Do you have to travel away from home? Does it mean weeks away at Brisbane? All of those things, really thinking it through. I guess the mantra that I probably had in my head at the time was, you hope for the best, but you've got to write it as if you're preparing for the worst.
You touched on the pricing and resources that you were surprised how much cost once you added it all up.
Yeah.
How did you, or what resource did you find useful in determining what you asked for in your plan and the cost involved in your plan?
So again, I started having conversations months and months and months earlier with my therapist with Spina Bifida Queensland, just saying what potentially is Mish going to need, not just in the immediate future, but even say, let's in the 5 years, right down to she needs a walker. What kind of walker? We trialled all the equipment that we potentially would need. It's not an exact science, but at least I went in thinking, I know she needs A, B, C, D, E. I know this option is better than that option. So then the next thing I did, once I actually sat down to write out my workbook, was again I went to the NDIS website, there's a link if you just Google price list and look for the Queensland link. It breaks it up into about 12 different categories, and it lists then all the different things, all the different resources, all the different therapies, modifications that NDIS will fund. I warn you, it took hours, but I printed them all out, and I actually sat there with a pencil and went, hearing aids, no. Okay, walker, yes. And then it might list 3 or 4 different kinds of walker. So then I was able to go, yes, I know she needed this one, not that one. And that was really beneficial because there's different, for example, one's valued at $1,200, one's valued at $800. I believe strongly that if I just walked in and said, I need Mish to walk, you've got to write it from Mish's perspective. Mish is saying, I would like to walk. I believe I need a walker. For your planner who doesn't understand the options, doesn't understand the walkers, she could have easily just gone, yep, pediatric walker, $850. And that would have been unfortunate because Mish would have needed the $1,200 one. So actually knowing exactly specifically what equipment she needed, right down to even when it comes to continence aids, because I kept the diary, I was able to say I knew that Mish needed 6 to 8 nappies a day, so that therefore adds up to X amount yearly, so therefore it's in category C. Therefore you know that the funding that you've asked for matches her needs. It was really good doing that process also helped because I was able to prompt myself. There was little things that even though I thought I'd gone over it and over it and over it, to go, oh, I forgot about a pod book. We have our electronic pod device, and I have a fantastic pod book now that SBH Queensland has really generously provided for us, but she uses it a lot, and so wear and tear is taking its toll. So to actually go, in the next 12 months I probably need another one, and to see it just there was a good prompt to go, yep, that's another little thing that we'll need and to put down for. So going through that process was invaluable.
Okay, and highlights the need to be planned.
Yes.
Because I think there's a bit of a misconception out there that the planner might be more well informed than they actually are.
Yes.
So discussing the planner, can we go a little bit more in depth? Did you have a choice of planners, or were you allocated one by NDIS?
No, so the process was, I kind of joked to a few friends and said it was a bit like childbirth. You're kind of waiting for it to happen, waiting for the phone call, waiting to be called forward, and then boom, we got the phone call on a Thursday. They wanted to ask us a series of questions over the phone. It was over school holidays, so we were away camping. So I can remember sort of standing on the beach, watching the kids trying to answer these questions. They weren't too hard, but they need to know your CRN number, so make sure you know your CRN number. And then within half an hour on that same phone call, we got told that we were approved. They would email us Michelle's NDIS number. Then within 10 minutes of hanging up that phone call, I had the planner, which is Uniting Care, ring us to say, hi, we've just gotten Michelle's details, we'd like to meet with you, can you come in this afternoon? So if I hadn't been prepared, I would have been caught between being extremely enthusiastic to get the process happening, but then going, oh my goodness, like I said, it was like childbirth. When it happens, it's just like it's happened. It's just full on. So fortunately I was able to say, no, we're away camping, we won't be back till Monday. She was like, how about Monday 9 a.m? So even though I was going to be back Monday, it was going to be immediate. So I remember getting home thinking, oh, it's all right, I'm organised, and then reading over my plan going, oh no, I don't think I actually am, and actually fleshing it out even more. So the planner was lovely. I found her very easy to talk to, asked really well-informed questions, but again, did not know Michelle's medical condition at all. And I guess the most simplest way of putting it is their job is just to tell your story. So you have to give them the information. Their job and their skill is in them writing it in a way that's acceptable and presentable to the NDIA. So as I said, the first interview was again a series of paperwork. There's stacks and stacks of paperwork you have to sign regarding confidentiality, sharing of information. There's a survey that you have to do. You have to jump onto their laptop and do a survey that they don't see the answers to that survey. It goes directly to the NDIA. And it's really random multiple choice questions like, could your child carry a washing basket of clothes upstairs? For some kids that's going to be no, some kids that's a definite yes, some kids it's like, that's a really bizarre question. And they're really random, so it might be that which would require some skill and some strength to, can your child dress themselves? Can your child hold a pencil? So, you know, I found that was a really interesting survey. It took about 10 minutes. But again, just having a really thorough understanding of what your child can and can't do. And, you know, some of those questions are a little bit tricky and you almost want to say, well, maybe under a certain set of circumstances with help. But you don't, it's just yes or no, yes or no. So yes, that first one was just paperwork signing, paperwork, them going over, they give you a pack and it's just again going over what their role is. I found myself a little bit impatient in that first interview. It was like, yes, I know that, I get this, I just want to really have the conversation. But of course it's obviously a very important red tape that they have to go through. And then we started talking about Michelle's needs. Because I had done the work, prepared the workbook in my own format, as I said earlier, I found the workbook itself didn't give me enough room to write Michelle's story and to write out everything that I wanted. So I did it as a Word document. And when I went to the interview, I brought it along as a hard copy, and I also brought it on a USB as electronic copy. So therefore we were able to sit down, look at the workbook that I'd written out. She thought it was fantastic. She said it pretty much knocked off 2 interviews that we would have otherwise had to have, because ordinarily the process is that they would give you the paper copy of the workbook, they would have one, and they start at the beginning and they just write it out. Okay, so tell us about Michelle. I personally found, and everybody's going to be different, but I personally found because Michelle's needs are so complex and she has so many different challenges in different arenas, if I'd had to probably sit down and just talk that through, A, it would have taken a very long time, but B, I think unless someone's really, again, familiar with your child's condition, it could have been information overload and there could have been important information that could have been lost or misconstrued, or she just may not have got it because her head perhaps was taking in so much. So to actually have it already written out, you could almost tell it was like, oh, this makes it easier. And she asked my permission because I gave her the electronic copy. Could she then just cut and paste using my words, my language, into her own document, which would have saved an awful amount of time. So that was really good. So she then sat there and read it. My document was about 21 pages long. She read through that while then I'd signed my life away and did all the surveys. And then she was able to go, oh, okay, so let's talk about this. And then we were able to sort of zero in on the issues that she didn't quite understand or that she wanted to really flesh out. I think that I was prepared to kind of go in and have a bit of a battle. I was expecting when it came to the big ticket items, the things that were going to cost the most, like bathroom modification. I also, in my head, probably had an old school way of doing things in terms of previously when we wanted to do bathroom modification, we'd contacted Life Tech. We understood that the process at the time was they would fund up to 50%. You would use their tradespeople to modify the bathroom. So we'd gone through that process already of having a builder come out with an OT and a physio, talking through what they believed Michelle needs, what changes would have to happen. The builder then going, well, yes, that can be done, that can't be done, structurally that's okay, that's going to cost a lot. And then providing I think a large quote to have that happen. It meant huge impact on the family because bathroom being unusable for a period of time, it was knocking out doorways, it was jackhammering up concrete. It was going to be a big process, and then of course us having to foot half the bill. Hubby's also very handy because he works in the building sector, so for him he found, and this is no offence to Life Tech, but he found because they were using their set tradies. The prices were probably more exorbitant than if we'd just been able to contract our own builders to come and do the job. So we're a little bit dismayed, I suppose, by the old school way of doing things, but expected that again was going to carry over into NDIS. Another thing that we'd found concerning in the old way of doing things was that we couldn't have had our bathroom modified until the entryway of our house was done, so therefore it meant we had to have ramps done first before bathroom, even though we felt as a family our bathroom was our immediate need. So I suppose in my head I was prepared to have to talk all that through with NDIS and justify why we wanted it. And I was actually really pleasantly surprised. They were just like, yep, because they had that really thorough understanding of Michelle's condition and what her needs were when it came to toileting. They were just like, yep, tick, move on. And I was a bit like, oh, but that was fine.
So you have the capacity to hire your own builders then?
Yep,
Is there any criteria?
We're in the process now. Funding it has been approved, but the way they write it when you get your plan back is it just says $1. Don't freak out and think, oh my goodness, we only have $1 to spend. It's about acknowledging that they're going to allow money, but based on your quotes. I'm waiting for this to be confirmed to me by NDIS, but this is the understanding that I've been given from the forum, so other people that have been through it, is that you have the freedom to then, once your plan has been drawn up and discussed with an OT, and that's then checked over by someone, I guess, who has the right qualifications with NDIA, that then you can get 3 quotes, so from tradespeople in your local community that you know and trust. I really like that because, again, that's upskilling and using local businesses. So, for example, for us, we know builders that we really like and we value their work, we know they're honest, we know that they do a good job. We now have the option to go, lovely, can you please provide us with the quote? And then NDIS will sign off and agree to the cheapest quote, which makes sense. So I like feeling like we have more options and we're more empowered to use people that we know and trust and feel are going to do a good job and listen to us, because at the end of the day it's going to be the little things that are going to make that plan work or not work. So I like that. That's been really good. And I like the fact that I was expecting I would have to argue why I would want, potentially $25,000 to modify our bathroom. Wasn't an issue. Surprisingly though, hang on, let me backtrack. Why I think that wasn't an issue was because, again, I'd done my homework. I had our OT through SBH Queensland, who knows Mish, come and has been to our house many times. We've talked through it, we've come up plans, we've changed plans. We've also compared those plans with my physio and OT that I work with disability services. Also, we'd had friends who are builders who'd worked on disability projects before come out and say, yep, that'll work, that won't work, what if we just move it over here? So we'd had a really collective pool of well-informed people who knew exactly what they were doing work with us. So when I asked for this, I had 3 letters of support from all of my physios and OTs, plus the plans, plus a rationale. So there was plenty of evidence to say what we were asking for was fair and reasonable and well planned out. So I think that certainly helps. The thing that for other families to know, what caught me off guard perhaps the most, was the area that I'd always found historically Mish had just sailed through. We just knew she was nonverbal, we knew she couldn't walk, so we'd always just gotten funding and we'd always just gotten physio and OT support and speechy. That was the area that NDIS wanted to know how many hours. And more than that, I was sort of going, well, she's always had fortnightly and that works really well. That wasn't enough. They want to know, what are her goals for the next 12 months? So if she has fortnightly speech and fortnightly OT and fortnightly physio, what is she going to achieve by having that much in the next 12 months? So what were her goals? That was the tricky one that I wasn't prepared for. So actually breaking it down, going, well, in the next 3 months, we would love her just to be able to stand in her walker unassisted for at least 10 seconds, just to be able to get the concept of standing and being able to hold herself. that would be a goal for us for, say, the next 3 months. And then in 6 months, we'd like her to perhaps be able to take that one step further and take 5 steps, but also be able to know how to crawl up to the walker, turn herself around, stand in the correct position, and then take steps. They really wanted to break it down as to what your goals were. So yeah, that was interesting.
So was there unit pricing available on that price list as well? So
No, that's the one area that I wasn't able to say specifically what I wanted, because the way that they word it and the way they break it up, I couldn't interpret that into what that meant for me and my needs for Mish. So I was able just to have to be able to verbally talk through at a micro level what this means, what are our goals, because they need to be able to match that up in 12 months' time. They're going to want to be able to say, has she achieved this? And it was a painful and frustrating process, but then at the same time I found it was really valuable, because when it came to OT, I found that Mish does better with blocks of OT rather than fortnightly OT, because there are times that then she's having surgery and then she's perhaps not able to do regular therapy for weeks at a time because she's recuperating from surgery. But then when she's strong and well enough again, then I find we need to kind of pick up the ball and run with it to catch up for that lost time. So we're able to talk about having the freedom of saying, okay, speech, I know she needs regular, fortnightly, if not weekly, because she needs that, and we see she makes the most progress when she has it regularly. For OT, though, it was actually better to say, no, I want the freedom of saying it's okay not to have it for 2 months, and then we want to have a big, extensive block for 6 weeks, because once she's had surgery and perhaps has a new device or a new resource to work with, she needs the time to train to use that, to work with that. It was also good to be able to think outside the square. So, for example, when we were thinking about Mish's family and all of those earlier fluffy questions, it was about, well, you know, it's great that Mish can communicate with me, and it's great that I understand signing, but my children are still just learning Makaton. Hubby's away, so he's learning it, but he's not as fluent in it as me. But what does this mean now for Mish, who's 5, and eventually is going to want to be able to go and visit and play at friends' houses or have sleepovers at grandma's? So it was about, historically, my thoughts had always been, well, I'll run off and do a TAFE course in signing or get the training, and then I'll get hubby to do the training, and then maybe grandma will do the training. But we were able to say, can we have some additional funding so that we'll employ a speechie to come to our place on a night that suits? So, for example, what we would do is then say to our family and friends, Wednesday night, 7 o'clock, our speechie is going to come and teach everybody some basic Makaton or Auslan, whatever works for your child and your family, for that period of time. So then we were able to get family and closest friends and the neighbour next door, all of the people who are key people in Mish's life, able to come for 1 hour. She does a session with them and she just teaches the basics, how to say hello, goodbye, thank you, and the words perhaps Mish needs to know, like pain, sore, drink, food. That way it was about using the resources we had, but making, I guess, our environment more sustainable and supporting those support networks that we have that are also critically important in Mish's life, to get her to the next stage, you know, to get her able to participate in community. And those words, community participation, are key when it comes to NDIS funding. I think as parents we get so caught up and focused on their health needs. Oh, she really needs this medication. She really needs that service. But they're about the bigger picture. They see that health is very much health responsibilities, like hospitals' responsibility. Education is very much in the realm of education. They want to know, how do you get Mish to be a fully functioning, happy, productive member of society? So your goals really have to be reflective of that ideology. So yes, incorporating, how do you get her out in the community? How do you get her communicating with the neighbours and, you know, her local pastor, or all of those connections you have as family? How does Mish fully engage if you weren't there? If you were kind of trying to encourage her to be somewhat semi-independent. How does that happen? This is the baby steps we're taking now.
So has your plan been signed off, and what's your understanding of the next step?
No, so my plan, we feel very lucky that pretty much everything that we asked for was agreed to and was supported. The way they write it has been a little bit confusing in that, for example, her continence aids in terms of her catheters and her lubrication that she needs are different to her nappies. And so they're broken up. One is listed as continence aids and one is actually listed as community support. So I think it's the nappies that get listed as in community support. So initially when I read it, I went, there's not enough, they've forgotten the nappies, but they break it up into different categories. So the things that we've been successfully supported for are continence aids, the change table that she needs, bathroom modifications based on us getting a successful plan signed off and 3 quotes come in, and therapies. But again, the therapies are lumped into one large sum. So then that's for us to kind of sit down and break that down into what does that mean in terms of what does she have regularly, what do we then have in blocks. We have also chosen to self-manage. So we've had to, another thing families need to do is open up a bank account, because you have to fill out the form for them to have a bank account. It's okay to have it in a parent's name as long as you acknowledge that that's purely just for the NDIS funds. So yeah, we've chosen to self-manage just because I felt like I wanted to, from the go-get, understand how it works and have the freedom to choose, okay, this is what I want to spend the money on. I want to spend more on speech than I do OT, or I just wanted to understand how that all worked. So we're at the stage where they've come back to us with a plan, and we've now just got to think it through and go, yes, we agree, sign off, and then it's funded. Or there is a review process. So for example, if you've got something back and you're like, well, that's not quite right, or that's not enough, or that's not really reflective of her needs, then you can engage a review process.
So we might take this opportunity just to wrap up part one of this interview, because we've talked about the needs, how we go through the process of NDIS, and I think that the information we've gathered from Rachel during part 1 is just to be prepared, and please get support and advice from organisations such as SBH Queensland,
Yes.
or whatever organisation knows you, knows your child, knows your situation, in order to help you through this process, because we may be able to just highlight some things that you haven't thought of, and we may be able to help you word your plan so that you're as prepared as you can be.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise things can be missed. With that, would you think that's correct?
Absolutely. There is one question that does ask who your support networks are, and I think it's really easy to overlook who they are, because if they're an everyday part of your life, you can just take for granted that you see this doctor and that person, and you've got a package of feeding resources from SBH Queensland. But actually knowing who they are and how critical those roles are, and not only just listing them but writing them into your plan, was just so important. It was in critical importance, because it's then you don't know. The situation we're in now with Townsville is that we don't know who our service providers are, because it is brand new, and I want the freedom to know who's worked really well with Mish and where I want to spend Mish's money to get the best use of those funds. Because some people work really well with your child and understand that condition. Spina bifida is different to cerebral palsy, and I found that some physios are fantastic physios, but they may have had more experience in one area than another. So to keep Spina Bifida Queensland funded and involved in Mish's life was just so important to me. So to be able to actually write out and explain why I needed them and what they've been able to do for Mish and the changes they've been able to see, and also that they've had that history with her. I wanted them to be able to continue that relationship with her, not all of a sudden get this, little bucket of money, for example, and then have wish to start from the beginning with people who don't know her. So I can't underestimate the importance of really selling the agencies that have helped you. Like, this is the time to give back and to give them support.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Stay tuned, everyone, for part 2 of the interview. Stop.